Welcome back to another episode of the Morales Group Show. In today's topic, we are going to cover what are the pros and cons of a self-directed IRA. To help us with that, we have Edwin Kelly. He is the founder and CEO of Specialized Trust Company. Welcome back to the show, Edwin. How are you?
Jose, man, it's great to be back with your smiling face again.
Yeah, I love this topic because I think that for 37 years of my life, I thought that the only way to have a 401k, or the only way was to have a 401k and only invest in the specific funds that they had, knowing that I was a real estate investor myself and knowing that there was something better that I knew. So I found this vehicle called the self-directed IRA, and I'm super excited about sharing with other people. So let's go over what is a self-directed IRA and how does that vary from a traditional IRA, or how does that differ from um, just a traditional IRA? And then we can go into the pros of a self-directed IRA.
Okay. So I'm going to change up the terminology just a little bit because a traditional IRA is a specific type of IRA, in contrast to say a Roth IRA. So I know what you mean. So I'll clarify it so I'm clear. I group IRAs into two categories. I call them plain vanilla and truly self-directed. Okay, so when you were asking about traditional, what you're really asking about is like, what is a plain vanilla IRA? A plain vanilla IRA is the one that most Americans have, right? It's one that you get from a bank or a brokerage house, and it limits you or restricts the IRA owner into investing in what we call marketable securities, things like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and CDs, right? So it's very restrictive on the types of investments um, a client or an IRA owner can invest in using that retirement account. By contrast, a truly self directed IRA is a retirement account that allows you, the owner of that IRA, to invest in anything allowed by the government. So, yes, you can invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and CDs, but you can go way beyond that. You can invest in things like physical precious metals. In fact, I was just on a client call earlier today who was talking about buying precious metals in their retirement account here at Specialized. You can invest in notes, mortgages, deeds of trust, real estate, syndications, private equity, startup businesses, right? Existing businesses. I say that you're really only limited by a few rules that the government has and your own imagination.
I think that this is important because you shared with me in a previous episode that what's the largest size of a truly self-directed account that you've ever seen?
Yeah. So the largest one I've ever seen personally was about worth $180 million. The largest one that I know of is, I haven't seen it, haven't touched it, but I know of it, is a Roth IRA valued at around $5 billion was the last number that I saw. So to put that in perspective, and although I will say that is I don't think anybody's ever outperformed that one, right?
Yeah.
I think that that's the top performing retirement account of all time. To be accurate and to give a perspective to folks. Having said that, um, the contributions when the person opened that retirement account were probably somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 a year back when they started it. So what that tells you is that that person booked a $5 billion gain, and assuming that it was all done according to the rules, and as far as I know, it is. Um, that's like a $5 billion profit that is 100% tax free uh, for the life of that IRA owner. No income tax, no capital gains tax, no tax at all.
That's
That's
unbelievable.
that's beyond a home run deal. I don't even know what you call a deal like that.
No, it's unbelievable, and it's interesting because if you look at something like that, it'll be very hard for me to do that in a plain vanilla IRA where I'm getting 6 to 8%. It's like nearly impossible to do something like that. Versus if you actually have all of the investments available to you, like businesses, mortgages, notes, deeds of trust, tax liens, precious metals, whatever you choose to invest. So let's talk about like some of the pros. What would you say the pros of of a truly self-directed IRA versus a plain vanilla are?
Yeah. So, the number one, um, there's so many ways that I could talk about this, and a lot of these benefits kind of coalesce, right? And they overlap each other. I think number one I begin with is control, right? With a self-directed retirement account, you have control over your money. Whereas if you have a plain vanilla retirement account, the financial institution that you hired has control over your money, right? So those are two big distinctions. So the question that I ask people when they're deciding, hey, is self-directing right for me? Okay, there's various considerations, right? And various questions we can ask to help you determine whether or not self-directing is right for you.
Yeah,
But one of the big ones is, and this is one of my starting points. Well, who do you think cares most about your money? You or a bank or a brokerage that is based, on Wall Street, right? So that's the first question. Because I know when I ask that question myself, nobody cares more about my money than me, right? I care more than anybody else. So the question then is, okay, who is the best to make the decisions in terms of how that money gets allocated and invested, right? I believe that's me. So control is number one benefit, in my opinion, to self-directing. Um, Another benefit to self-directing is that you can invest in things that you know about, right? And so in your case, you're an expert in real estate investing, right?
100%.
You know more about an investment in real estate if you're underwriting the deal and looking at that deal than you would ever know about the mutual fund that's sitting in a retirement account, right? And so because you are more knowledgeable about that, your chances of success are significantly higher, right? Just because you have better information to make better decisions with. So being able to invest in things that you know and understand, I would say, is another benefit. Third benefit is that um, my gosh, it just flew out of my head. The third benefit is, oh yeah, yeah. Like, and again, these kind of are all up there together, but you can actually secure your money, right? And security is a big, big deal. You can own a real asset. So let me, and I'm going to marry in here, if you don't mind. I'll kind of bring in some downsides to
Hmm.
help illustrate how, right, there's an offset depending on how you do things. So one of the conversations, because the stock market has been going up and up and up, right? It has some corrections, but it's been going up and up, and then you have some more corrections. And the interesting thing is that when the stock market does well, we open fewer accounts than when the stock market does poorly. Because when the stock market does poorly, people say, "Well, I want an alternative, right? I've taken a hit. I want to do something different." And so self-directing is the alternative. However, it's actually been very steadily increasing, even with the stock market doing well. And so the question is, well, why is that? Why has it? Why have new people been flocking to self-directing in larger numbers? And to give you a perspective, $14 billion moved from plain vanilla accounts to self-directed accounts in 2023 alone, right, last year.
Wow.
So that's brand new money, right? Coming over. So when I talk about more people coming over, I'm giving you some numbers around this and what that means. So one of the reasons why is when I'm having conversations every day with people moving accounts over is the conversation goes something like this. I've been through enough market cycles. I'm now in my late 40s, 50s, maybe early 60s, and I just got back to where I was at the last reset. The problem is I know another correction is coming at some point, and I don't have another 10 years to get back to where I am today. I have to do something different. I don't have an option anymore. So the point is that because the market isn't secured, right? Stocks aren't secure, mutual funds aren't secured, your values can go down and they come back whenever they come back, if they do come back, right? Generally it does, it just takes a long period of time.
Hmm.
By contrast, you can actually secure your money with a real asset. So you could buy a rental property. You could invest in a trust deed, which is then secured by a real asset. So that real asset always has some intrinsic value to it. And if you have some level of control over that asset, then you have options in terms of what you can do with it. Now, one of the things that I'll point out is that in investing, I say there's three types of investments, right? There's good investments, bad investments, and fraudulent investments. Now, you have fraudulent investments in the traditional world, and you have fraudulent investments in the non traditional world, right?
Hmm.
The good news is, based on my experience and what I have seen, so this is my opinion, fraud across the board is very, very small. But what we need to do to the best of our abilities is always avoid fraud because fraud is always a losing proposition.
100%.
Right? It's always a losing proposition. So we definitely want to avoid fraud. One of the biggest Ponzi schemes that ever happened was the Bernie Madoff scandal, which there was more money personally. And unfortunately, the reason why those people were defrauded was again because there was no real underlying asset. So, one of the best protections for your money is to own or secure your money by an asset that is a tangible asset that you can actually do something with. So, again, there's a negative in that there is fraud when you invest, whether it's in the traditional world or the non traditional world. But one of the ways to try to manage that or be aware of that is to secure your money with a real asset, in which case you can minimize or mitigate that to some degree, right? So that being able to actually secure your money with an asset is um, is another huge benefit to self-directing your retirement accounts.
Got it. So if I understood you correctly, one is control, and it's funny because that wasn't even one of the things that popped in my head. But as you were mentioning it, I'm like, that's actually very important. Nobody's going to care about your money like I did, like you do. It's funny because I invested in real estate my entire career, and now that I have this vehicle available, it just gives me so many more options. Two, you said invest in things that you know. I have a competitive advantage in real estate because I buy and I help people buy and sell real estate for a living, so I know that better than anybody else. And then the security aspect of it. Now, this is one that I haven't gone into, and this is how that guy built that $5 billion truly self-directed account. It was in investing in a startup. You could actually invest in businesses as well, too, right? So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that people do, and I'll say that self-directing is a double-sided coin. So there's two ways that people can use self-directed retirement accounts to build wealth. One way is to set up your own account, have your own money in your own account, and make investments, right, to grow that account, create income streams, those types of things, right? In other words, to create wealth within your own retirement account. The other side of that coin has nothing to do with your own retirement account, is using other people's retirement accounts to act as your own private bank or funding source, right, for your investment portfolio, your investments, or your business, whether it's a new business or an existing business. And that's exactly how that retirement account got to that value. So the retirement account that I'm referring to is owned by a gentleman by the name of Peter Thiel, which some people know that name, some people may not know
Mhm.
that name, but he's an investor in Silicon Valley. And he set up a self-directed Roth IRA, and one of the investments that he made was in he bought some rights in that account on a company that came to be known as PayPal.
Wow.
And so he was able to use his self-directed Roth to buy rights, buy a percentage ownership in a startup company. And again, Peter Thiel, in his particular case, and I don't know Peter Thiel personally, but I know about Peter Thiel, and he invests in Silicon Valley companies, specifically in tech companies. He has a tremendous track record doing that, And so he was able to take his knowledge and by using a self-directed account, get control over the money in it, and then deploy that money in things that he understood better than what a mutual fund manager is doing on Wall Street. And there you see the payoff, right? Is that he was able to grow his account far larger than somebody else would have done that for him.
I love it, man. I love it. Okay. And then, what would you? And then, who can actually do this? Who can actually go truly self-directed? Because I think this is one of the questions, and it's important because I had tried to go truly self-directed maybe like 3 years ago, but I tried to do it myself. Meaning, I tried to make the phone call, and when I got done talking to my ADP representative, I was confused afterwards. I was like, I had no idea. They were speaking a completely different language. And it wasn't until I got onboarded with your company that your company actually jumped on a 30-way call with me, answered all of their questions, told them what needed to happen to truly become self-directed. Who can actually do this?
Yeah, so there's a couple different answers to that question. It's a great question. So the first answer is anyone that has a retirement account or wants a retirement account.
Mhm.
So that's the general answer, right? That's the high level answer. But drilling down realistically, let's talk about again. I'm going to throw out some pros and cons, right?
Mhm.
Because I always say, and I like the word trade off sometimes because sometimes things are a negative and sometimes it's just a trade off, right? What are you willing to get? Here's the thing. I've been fortunate enough to create. You have too, right? Been able to create a certain amount of financial success in your life. And one of the lessons I've learned building financial wealth and independence is this: half of getting what you want is knowing what you have to give up to get it. So there's always a trade off,
Yeah.
right? So we might have to work long hours in the beginning. So we're giving up or we're trading off time with family and friends.
Yeah.
It's 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 not one's better or worse than the other. It's just a choice we get to make for ourselves. So the advantage that I gave you earlier, the number one advantage, you have control over your money, can also be, depending upon the person, the number one disadvantage. You have control over your money, right? And so that's the self directed part. You're now making and directing the decisions for your money. And so there's some people that if they aren't ready yet to take on that level of responsibility, then self directing may not be the right fit for them. So, but if you're one of those people that you like the idea of having control over your money and being able to make those decisions, whether you know what you're going to do with it today or not is actually secondary. It's not even the primary consideration. It's what do you want to accomplish in life, and do you want to have control over your financial resources, right? So that you need to have the answer to yes. I want to control my own money, because if you don't want control over your money, then self-directing isn't right for you. So that would be like the second layer. The third uh, layer going down one, in terms of who can or should self-direct, would be: do you have an area of expertise or a direction you want to go that you can build wealth with that account? One, like you do, right? So for you,
Mhm.
it's like, hey, all we got to do is show you how to take your knowledge and now leverage it in a little different scenario than you've done in the past, right? So we can translate that over. Let's say you don't have that knowledge and expertise yet. Do you have a desire to learn how to make money on your own and build wealth? And so you don't have to know how to do that yet, but you do have to have the desire to accomplish that. And if you have that desire, then self-directing is probably going to be ideal for you.
I love it. Let's talk about like some of the fees associated. Are the fees higher when you go self-directed versus truly plain vanilla, or are they very similar or comparable?
So, great question. And I will tell you that when clients see the fees, and I'll talk about fees in terms of how it works generally in the industry, and I'll talk about, uh, I'll get into some specifics for you.
Yeah.
So, when clients see a fee schedule, I hear one of two things: that's expensive, or wow, that's cheap. How do you guys make any money? Now, I've never heard anybody say anything in between one of those two things. So the question is, well, what's the difference between those two people? And the answer is perspective. So this is the perspective that I mean. Most people have a retirement account through a bank or a brokerage, through their employer, right? Through their company 401k, 403b, TSP, whatever they have. And when I was in the Wall Street world, which is where I started my career,
Mm.
we were really good at creating what we called hidden fees, meaning you get a statement every year. And if you pull out your statement, test me on this, pull out your statement and you go and you look on your statement, find the place where it outlines the fees that you pay to the financial institution and all the managers for your account and the investments that you hold in it. And you will not find it because they do not have to disclose it to you on a statement. Where do they disclose it? Typically in prospectuses. Prospectuses are those big, thick, lengthy documents that as soon as you get them, they go in the circular file, right? So people have no idea what they're actually paying. Now, in my philosophy is this: if every business needs to make money, and every business is going to charge for their service, and I totally expect that. But I just think it's wrong to not disclose what you're charging if I'm paying for a service, I deserve to know what I'm paying for that service, right? And so that just seems like kind of common sense, but it's not so much in the traditional financial world. And so we have a fee schedule where it clearly outlines every single fee. And before a client ever becomes a client, a rep goes through that fee schedule with them. They have some options on that fee schedule. They elect the ones that they want, and then they sign it. So there's never any ambiguity. So to put it in perspective, what another reason, so I didn't put this under the benefits of self-directing, but I'll put it here now. When clients move from a traditional or plain vanilla type of retirement account to a self-directed retirement account, typically they save anywhere from 50% or more on annual fees going to a self-directed account. Clients instantly save money the moment they move to a self-directed retirement account. They just don't know what they're paying currently. And our staff will actually spend time on the phone looking at their investment saying, here's exactly what you pay. We've done calculations for people. We can pull it up because it's all public knowledge. It is disclosed, it's just not readily available, right? And so we'll actually show people, here's what you're paying now, here's what your fees are. To put it in perspective, there's a financial research organization. They're a nonprofit, does all kinds of great research called the Investment Company Institute, and they publish something every year called their Investment Company Fact Book. And if you look in the section on typical or average fees, it can range anywhere from 1.5 to 2.25% per year of assets is what traditional financial institutions can be charging. By contrast, we have basis points on our fee schedule, so you can make an apples to apples comparison. I think our highest basis point, because it depends on the level of assets a client has, is like 90 basis points. So it's like, I mean, you could just see just comparing basis points alone, right? It's a significant savings. Having said that, I'll say that when you're self-directing, there's three fees to be aware of, or three categories of fees to be aware of. So one is an activation or a setup fee. Every custodian charges it because there's a lot of work to get the account set up, get reporting set up, right? Move money over. Right? There's a lot of work on the front end. So there's usually a setup or activation fee. Then there is the annual fee, which is usually what most clients will pay, is that annual fee, and that covers most things. And then there can be what we call optional service and transactional fees, and that's the third category. So, so again, because you haven't seen these fees before, if you're coming from a plain vanilla type of retirement account, those are the fees that you would expect to pay, and they'll fall into those three categories generally speaking, across any self-directed custodian.
It's funny because I've read books and financial books, and a lot of them talk about the fees, um, but they say that they're hidden. And it's really difficult to know how much, like, nowhere in ADP did I know how much I was paying in fees. How can somebody find out how much they're actually paying in fees?
So, well, one way, and this is a trick I taught to my reps when they're working with clients, if clients want to know and get more informed about the fees that they're currently paying. So when you set up a new account, you have to, and if you're transferring money over,
Yeah.
then so like let's just let's say with you, Jose. Let's say you were setting up a new account at Specialized, and you said, "Hey, I want to transfer money from another IRA or my old 401k over to you guys." One of the things that you would submit to transfer that money is a copy of your statement, right? The IRS, the government, because there's contribution limits on retirement accounts. So let's just say you had $100,000 in an old 401k you want to move over. Well, that's higher than the contribution limit on an IRA this year, right? So if we got audited or that account got audited, the question would be you deposited $100,000 in Jose's account. That's more than the contribution limit. Why did you make that deposit? The question is because it was already in a retirement account. We did a transfer, and here's the statement, right? So one of the things you would submit is that
Supply.
statement. All right. So we have the statement. What you can do is when you if you take a statement that you have, it shows you the investments that you hold, and it it will have like a QSIP or a ticker, right? Depending upon the type of security you hold, it'll have a different symbol for it, but there will be a symbol, and you can just go to Google Finance and you literally type that symbol in, and it pulls up a data sheet, basically a data page, and it will show you like past performance. It will show you all kinds of things, but one of the things on there is that will show you the fees. The fees are stated in basis points or a percentage of overall assets. And then literally, we just take that percentage and we multiply it by the dollar amount that it says is allocated to that position. And that tells you what you're paying every single year.
Wow. Which adds up big time, I would imagine. Now, and I don't think we covered this because I didn't know if I could transfer my account over to you guys. What are the some of the requirements to be able to transfer, like a existing plain vanilla into truly self directed?
Yeah. So I'll say there's three ways to deposit money into a self-directed IRA. Okay. So the first way is a contribution. So if you have earned income this year, right, then that qualifies you to contribute to a retirement account, right? So we take money out of our checking account, savings account, deposit it in our retirement account, right? We could go up to our contribution limit. That can vary by person. Okay, so there's the government. What they publish is the max dollar amount you can put in, and then there can be some qualifications to some of those contribution limits. The second way is what's called a transfer. A transfer is where you transfer from one IRA at one financial institution to another IRA at another financial institution. Generally speaking, you can do as many transfers in a given year as you want. It is unlimited. Transfers are a non taxable event. So if you have $100,000 in an IRA at a brokerage house right now, 100,000 would show up in your self-directed IRA when you transfer that over. So transfers are typically unlimited and without restriction. Okay. The third category of movement of money that people will talk about is a rollover. Now, rollover means different things to different people. We commonly do trustee to trustee transfers, which is different. You can do that with different types of accounts. Without getting into all the technical stuff, I'll just say that with a rollover, the way that most people use the term rollover, that means, hey, I have a 401k at an old employer and I'm going to roll over that money to an IRA. That's how most people use that term. Okay, so when it comes to rollovers, there can be certain restrictions. To move money out of a company sponsored plan, you typically have to have a qualifying event. There's various different events that qualify to pull money out of a plan. The most common one is separation from the employer, right? So that's one. Um, there are some folks who say, well, if I still have money at an existing employer, can I move some of the money in my plan to an IRA? And the answer is sometimes you can. Again, it comes back, it depends on individual circumstances. But typically, that's where you're going to find the restrictions are in place. Is on an employer plan when you're not the employer, right? It's not your company, somebody else is the employer. That's usually where you're going to see the restrictions, and usually only in the event that you're still currently employed there, Again, there can be options that exist to move some of that money out or all of it in some cases, but um, that's where you're going to see any kind of restrictions on movement of money.
So the way I was able to do it is I was actually the employer, so I was able to switch my entire company's plan to go truly self-directed for myself and some of my employees. And then I have friends that I'm probably going to be sending this video to that have separated from the previous employer. And because they've separated from the previous employer, then they can do it as well too. They can basically roll over that whatever amount they had into a truly self-directed. And now they would have basically all of the options that are legal that the government allows you to invest to be able to invest in. Basically, can you borrow money to make an investment? Meaning, like, if I was to buy real estate, could I leverage that money as well too? And what are the restrictions if I borrow money to buy real estate with my self-directed IRA?
Yeah. So this is one of the I call it a secret, and a secret is basically just something that's not common knowledge, right? That most people are not aware of. But this is one of the best known secrets and legal backdoors to the contribution limits. So one of the things that the rules allow for is, believe it or not, the government says if you do not have enough cash in your retirement account to make an investment, or you just don't want to use all your own cash, your account is allowed to borrow it. So just like people buy real estate outside of an IRA by putting some money down and borrowing some money, it is possible to do the exact same thing inside of a retirement account. Now, I'll say there's two things that you need to be aware of when borrowing inside of a retirement account. The first one is that it has to be what's called a non recourse loan. A non recourse loan, because one of the rules states that we're not allowed to personally guarantee funds or extend credit to our retirement account. So we can't personally guarantee a loan, and our IRA cannot personally guarantee it. It doesn't say we're not allowed to borrow the money, it just says we can't personally guarantee it, right? So the way we stay clean and stay compliant with that rule is we use what's called a non-recourse loan. Now, most people will ask me and say, and by the way, I think this is a misnomer. I think non-recourse is probably the wrong language, because people say, well, if they have no familiarity with this, they'll say, well, who in the world would give me a loan with no recourse? Like, I could just run off with the money and they can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So a better way to call it. This is not what the industry calls it. This is what I call it. I call it a limited recourse loan, because that's actually accurate. Okay. So a non-recourse note will have somewhere in the note, in the language, in the event of default, the lender agrees to take back the property or the asset for full satisfaction of the debt. There is no additional recourse to the IRA or the IRA owner. It's that language that makes it a non-recourse loan.
Mm-hmm.
There is recourse, right? The asset
Yes.
itself. So, uh, so I call that a limited recourse loan. I don't call that a non-recourse loan. There's limited recourse, right, on that loan to the lender for their protection. So that's the first rule. If you're borrowing money in a retirement account, it's got to be non-recourse debt. Okay. Now that, by the way, just to clarify, if I'm loaning money from my retirement account, say to you on a deal, that's not a non-recourse loan, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you personally guarantee that loan for me, because my IRA isn't encumbered. My IRA, the asset that it owns is the note itself. Two different things. So I want to clarify that. Second thing to be aware of, depending upon the type of account that a person uses, specifically an IRA as an example, it can trigger a tax inside the account called UDFI, Unrelated Debt Financed Income. Now, UDFI, I call that a subset of UBIT, which is a term that people who are familiar with this, or a little bit familiar with this, will often use. They'll usually use the term UBIT. UDFI is a little bit more accurate way to talk about it. It is a tax that is based on a percentage of profits or income that is derived in the account from uh, the use of that debt. Okay, without getting into all the details of making it overly complicated, what I will tell you is it does depend. I say you will, if you're using an IRA, you will trigger UDFI and you may pay some tax. Right? You may
Hmm.
not pay. Um, but there's also ways that we can that the retirement account owner can eliminate that UDFI altogether, depending upon how they structure that deal or set up a certain type of an account. So there's ways to deal with that. So I don't want to get too much into detail with it, but I will say um, it's something to be aware of if you're going to go down that path. Just be aware those two things. You asked me what's true if you're borrowing money. I would say those two things you need to be completely aware of if you're going to consider borrowing money inside of a retirement account.
Got it. What is a prohibited transaction in a truly self-directed?
Um, Prohibited transaction. So prohibited transaction, people in the industry will call it PT for short, right? But prohibited transaction are basically the don'ts, right? So here's the example I like to give. So we could put this into the category of uh, trade-offs when it comes to self-directing, right? So we'll go back to that question. So I like to try to connect as many dots for you as Jose as I can because I know you like that. So you could put this one conceivably in the this is one of the trade-offs or the cons of self-directing. There are rules and regs that we need to go by when we're self-directing our retirement accounts, right? And what I tell people is like, look, don't get mad at me. I didn't write the rule book. It's the government's rule book. It's not mine. If the government allows it, we generally allow it, right? We don't put restrictions on you, but the government puts restrictions on all of us. So the way that now one of the downsides is that people say, well, self-directing is complicated because you got to understand the rules and regs. I don't think it's that complicated. There's a new level of knowledge and that you need to have. We train all that though for clients, so you have access to the information when you become a client. But but yes, there's additional knowledge that you need to acquire so that you can invest your account and manage your retirement account in a compliant fashion, right? Um, so the way that the government wrote the rules, and this is why the way they write, as far as I know, all the rules and the laws, right? The government doesn't tell us what to do. The government tells us what not to do. If the government doesn't specify that it's something we're not allowed to do, we're allowed to draw the conclusion
That we're
that,
allowed to do it.
right. So let me give an example uh, that everybody would be familiar with, right? If someone walked up to you, Jose, and said, you know, they said, you know what? They screamed all kinds of foul language at you and called you some nasty names.
Hmm.
And you call the police. Say, hey, this guy called me some bad names. The police are going to say, well, I'd stay away from the guy. Why? Because there's no rule that says people have to treat you and I nicely.
Yeah.
Nobody has to be nice to us. There's no rule that says that.
Yeah.
But change that up. Guy walks up to you, slaps you in the face. You call the police, say, this guy just assaulted me. They'll come arrest him. Why?
Yeah.
Because there's a rule that says you're not allowed to physically violate somebody's person. That is, right? That's the don't. So the do doesn't exist, but the don'ts exist. So prohibited transactions are the don'ts. What don't we do? What are we not allowed to do according to the government? When we understand what those don'ts are, then
Everything else.
then then we can kind of draw the conclusion that we're allowed to do things. So what are some of the prohibited transaction rules? Well, I've already given you one of them. You're not allowed to personally guarantee debt, right? So, and I showed you how we deal with that in a compliant fashion. We structure, if we're going to borrow money in our retirement account, we use a non-recourse loan, right? So there's a prohibited transaction. Here's how we solve that, or here's how we work with that.
Hmm.
Another one is um, you cannot invest in beer or wine in your retirement account. Right now, I enjoy French wine a lot. I just don't buy it in my retirement account. And by the way, that's not a joke. Um, that alcoholic beverages is prohibited in the rules. You cannot buy alcoholic beverages in your retirement account. So if you like beer, I say, that's fine. Just don't buy it in your retirement account.
That's so
By the
funny.
way, although you're not allowed to buy beer, I can show you how to buy the brewery that makes it.
Right.
So alcoholic beverages falls under a larger heading called collectibles, right? Antiques, gems, rugs, stamps, coins. There are exceptions to the coin rule, by the way. The government says, you're not allowed to buy coins in your retirement account unless, of course, you buy them from us. Then we'll make an exception for you.
That's
so,
funny.
so there's some nuances in the rules, but those are basically a few of the prohibited transactions.
Well, let me ask you this to just continue going on that. If I buy a property, could I live inside personally of the home? Could the home be for personal use? If I buy an Airbnb, could I use it? If I buy a property, could I do the maintenance on the property myself and pay myself for the work that I did?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. So all of those questions go to a category where the government says a prohibited transaction is no self dealing. No self dealing. Now, self dealing is the one when someone becomes a new client. I actually teach a class on this to new clients every single month. We teach it live every month. And so it's really about coming in, understanding the accounts you have, why you have them, how they work, what those do's and don'ts, right, are. And so we have a whole class that we offer to clients when they become a client that first month that they come in so that they can kind of hit the ground running right within 30 days and start making money with their self-directed retirement accounts. So all those questions that you asked me all fall under the heading of
Self
self-dealing.
dealing.
That's that self-dealing is a prohibited transaction. Now, for today's purposes, I'll just answer your question and say no personal use. So no, you couldn't use it, right? So no personal use, whether it's an Airbnb or a primary residence or a rental property, under no circumstances can you use it personally. The overarching rule or idea behind the rules is that when your retirement account makes an investment, you yourself, right, Jose, you are supposed to get no personal benefit from that investment other than the growth and appreciation of the retirement account itself. Generally, if you get some sort of personal benefit, it could be deemed a prohibited transaction.
What are the consequences if you do a prohibited transaction?
Penalties, and penalties are stiff. And one of the reasons why penalties are stiff is because
Discourage that behavior.
is to discourage the behavior because the government has to make the penalties stiff for things that they don't look at very often.
Yeah.
And so these accounts rarely get audited. That, by the way, that don't never take that as permission to go do whatever you want with your account, right? Because that's not the case. We want to invest according to the rules and manage our accounts according to the rules always. Having said that, though, one of the reasons why the penalties are stiff is because these things don't get audited very often, and when they do get audited, I'll just tell you my experience is that they get audited typically when a client is undergoing an audit overall. And then what happens is the auditor will look at their business accounts, their personal accounts, their retirement, right? They look at everything, oftentimes when somebody goes through an audit. So, anyway, that's typically when it gets audited. But because they don't get audited, the penalties are pretty stiff, which is why like we take the stance and we do the education to say
Don't do
avoid
that.
to avoid all penalties altogether.
What is this concept of financial friends? And maybe this is where we can end on this.
Yeah, so financial friends let's go back to that two-sided coin that I talked about earlier, right? One of my favorite topics, by the way, because the, it's crazy once you step into this world. And by the way, this is why I said earlier, if you have the desire to learn how to make money and build wealth, that's what it takes to get started. That
100%.
you bring a desire because I don't want to say it's easy to build wealth, but I will say it's not as complicated as everybody likes to make it out to be, right? So I'll use this as an example to illustrate both sides and how it benefits everybody. You're a full-time real estate investor.
Yep.
You're a real entrepreneur, right? I would go beyond investor and say you're a true entrepreneur, right?
Hmm.
And so you have a need for capital. In fact, there's a book written by a gentleman. It's called Secret Pillars of Wealth, and the focus of the book was to dissect the top 1% of the wealthiest people in this country. And the question was, the thesis, right, was how did the 1% get to be the 1%? 74% of that top 1%, right, 3/4 of those people got that into the top 1% only one of two ways. They were either real estate investors or they were entrepreneur business owners. That's it. That's the
That's it.
only way they got into the top 1%. What do those two things have in common? Because this is the foundation of building wealth through self directing. They leverage people and money.
I love that.
Only have so many hours in the day, and I'm only good at certain things, and I can't be good at everything. I also have limited financial resources. Everybody has limited financial. Elon Musk has limited financial resources. That's why when he bought um, Twitter, he went to raise outside capital. Did he use some of his own capital? Yes, but did he take outside capital as well? Absolutely, he did. But why? How do you think Elon Musk got to be that way? He understands these two principles, right? To build wealth and to get beyond your own resources, you leverage resources, people, and money. So the concept of financial friends leverages those two things, right? I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in real estate to any degree that you are.
Hmm.
But if I want to make money in real estate, I have a retirement account and I have cash in that retirement account. You and I know each other. I could come to you and I can say, Jose, I've got cash. You know real estate. You can do more real estate if you have access to more capital. If I put up the capital, what could I get out of this transaction? Well, you know what you're going to get out of the transaction. You're going to get access to another source of capital, right? So you get capital for your business. I get the opportunity to find an investment run by somebody who understands, who's an expert in that area, right? So I don't have to be the expert anymore. And I don't have to put all the time into building a real estate portfolio for myself because you could help me do that, right? The great thing about it too is that you and I are going to negotiate terms of a deal that work for you and me. So
Hmm.
this isn't one sided, right? You go to Wall Street, it's one sided. They laid it all out. They say is take it or leave it. You and I don't get to negotiate any of those terms. But you and I get to negotiate all the terms working together, right? To partner up where I can leverage your knowledge, your expertise. You get to leverage my capital. And that's the basic concept of financial friends. And so you don't have to be an expert in investing to go out and start making money in something, right? It's about learning how these principles work and how to build the skill set and network and how people really build wealth in the real world. And this is how it's done. It's all about leveraging.
Yeah, and I think what I love about that as well too is that somebody could have the expertise but not the capital, but somebody could have a plain vanilla retirement account and be tired of the ups and downs that that provides you, or be tired of not having control. And this is a way where you can actually combine those two and create a win-win situation without having to play by the bank's rules. Because if I'm borrowing money from the bank's going to say, "Oh, these are my terms. This is how many points." If we're working together on something, we could say, "Hey, look, you get X percentage of the equity. You get X percentage of this, or you get this or that." And now you're able to create a win-win situation. And I think a lot of people don't actually know that they can do this. So once they're aware of it, it's like, oh man, like I could actually do this, or I've always wanted to do that, or I've always wanted to flip a property, or I've always wanted to be the bank on a real estate deal. So I think it just opens it up. Anything else, Edwin, that you think would be helpful to people that are considering like a truly self-directed? And it's funny because now you got me talking plain vanilla and truly self-directed, which I think is the easiest way to describe it, just to be um, honest. So, anything else that you think we might have missed on pros and cons of going self-directed? And if somebody is considering going in that direction, what advice would you give them? And then how could they get a hold of your company if they're considering that?
Yeah. So, um, when I launched this company and we built out all the processes and the resources, it was designed to work with people at all different levels. So, I had a client call, uh, like it runs the gamut, right? I mean, we have people who are just starting and opening up their first account and starting with a contribution because they just don't have any accounts set up. Um, I have another account that I was working with before I jumped on this call who owns a business in a high technology field, 167 employees, right? And I'm working with them on all of their stuff. So it runs the gambit. Everybody's situation is different. And this is not cookie cutter stuff. It requires a custom approach. And so for that, we've built the entire system to basically help people go every step of the way. And so the first step is to find out more about how would this work for me. We've done it. You've asked me a lot of great questions, and we've given out a lot of great information as an intro to this. And oftentimes the next step is, well, okay, now I have very specific questions about my own situation.
Mm-hmm.
Best way to get those answered is to have a conversation with a self-directed specialist. And so if you go to our website, specializedtrustcompany.com, we have a form there where I'm giving away my latest book for free. So you can get my latest book for free, which will have some other great information. I call it the Sesame Street for self-directing. Spent a lot of money putting that together and delivering it in a way that people would get it and understand it and want to kind of go through it. So that's one piece of it. And then you also get a free strategy call. So this is where you can schedule up to an hour appointment with a self-directed specialist. They'll answer all your questions, give you a personalized education. I'm giving your background, where you're at, where you want to go, what you have, all of those types of things. That's always the best next step. And then you'll be armed with more information very specific to your situation. And then you can decide where to go from there.
All right. Well, Edwin, I do want to say thank you for taking the time to be on the show. Today we had Edwin Kelly. We talked about what are the pros and cons of self-directed IRAs. He is a specialized trust company. If you see value, please reach out to him. To our viewers, if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that this episode will be helpful to a friend, make sure to hit that share button. Thank you again, Edwin, and to our viewers, until next time.